Fantastic Four return after a disastrous fourth film in their history to join the MCU. Was it worth the wait? Find out when Johnnie Torch reviews Fantastic Four First Steps. Well, welcome into another Johnnie Torch review, this time looking at the long-awaited return of the Fantastic Four, this time joining the MCU. Hello everyone, I'm Johnny from Johnnie Torch Reviews, and this is a film that has struck some with consternation for some of the choices going into this, and we'll get to that in a second. But I welcome in, and this is the second superhero movie we've been favored with this month. The merry month of July also saw Superman returning to the big screen and flying high. Did the Fantastic Four, who are the first family of Marvel. You know, Superman, of course, being the first superhero, period, but the first superhero under the DC brand. Now the Fantastic Four, the first heroes, technically, of the Marvel Universe. Although, of course, you know, Captain America, Namor, several others were folded into the Marvel Universe eventually. But how did this new incarnation present itself? Well, let's take a look at the history before we get into any spoilers or anything. I always try to give a bit of history, and we'll do a spoiler-free mini review before we get into spoilers. But of course, the Roger Corman film was the first film. It was not released for public consumption. It was just made, and pretty much made on the cheap, simply to give Roger Corman the rights, because he had to have a film made of the Fantastic Four within a certain amount of time, otherwise they'd lose the rights. Eventually, they lost the rights. They made the film without releasing it or really having any intention to release it. And of course, the Marvel properties kind of sat dormant for that was like in the early 90s, I believe. They sat dormant for like another 10 years before any movement was made to try to get some of these properties, you know, on the big screen. And the next opportunity was after, of course, X-Men and Spider-Man and Blade had proved themselves really successful. We had the Tim Story films, which I actually enjoy a lot. I think they're very good. Now, they could be kind of seen as a little less than ambitious. Of course, the second film had Galactus as a cloud, which was, that pretty much sunk that film. I think that a lot of people had a bad taste in their mouth over that film, which is why there was not a third film in that particular franchise, which I think they should have been. They had a great cast, of course. Michael Chiklis, Chris Evans, Jessica Alba, which, to her credit, they made her up to look like Sue about as much as possible. They kind of got away with it in the first film. I think in the second film, it kind of looked a little odd. You know, with the contact lenses and the hair, the wig, and everything. With Ian Grufford, I believe his name is, as Reed Richards. So you had a pretty good cast. You had the sadly late Julian McMahon as Dr. Doom, which was probably the weak point of those films. Nothing against him personally. You know, he did as well as he could with that script, but he was not really playing the monarch of Latveria. He was sort of Norman Osborn. And so some of the choices there left fans wanting. I mean, I liked it for the most part. Perhaps the tone was a little jokey. We'll get into that in a moment. And after that was canceled, Fox decided to go forward with a reboot, a reimagineering of the Fantastic Four, which included Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, completely race-changing the character, changing the makeup of the family dynamics, because now obviously Sue had to be adopted. And this film I did not see. It's sort of irreverently referred to as Fanforstic, which I remember we called it back in the day. Again, Josh Trank was going for a little more horror tinged script. It did not interest me at all. I did not want to see race changed Human Torch. I did not want to see apparently Ben Grimm gets his catchphrase because his brother beat him up. I mean, it just did not feel like anything authentic to the Fantastic Four comic and characters and everything. So I completely passed on that. And again, they didn't do a very comic accurate Doom. So that one went by the wayside. Now, of course, Disney/Marvel reacquired all the properties. Fox went under, so the MCU now is trying to fold in the Fantastic Four, the X-Men. They've already gotten Daredevil from Fox as well. They got Ghost Rider from Sony back. They got pretty much everything they need, with the deal for Spider-Man. So it was only a matter of time before we can get the Fantastic Four, Marvel's first family, properly brought into the MCU. Now, as I said, sort of to set the stage here, when fans saw kind of what they were doing with this one and where they were going, it led to some complaints. It led to some grumbling. First off, Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards. We got John Krasinski, I believe is his name, as Reed Richards in the Multiverse of Madness with Doctor Strange. Some were expecting him to reprise the role eventually as Mr. Fantastic in the legitimate Fantastic Four film. That wasn't to be, and they cast Pedro Pascal, who has been in everything and who is kind of, he's not a fan darling at this point. I mean, he's in everything. He's acting very peculiarly, to say the least, at times. And, it really didn't endear this film to a lot of fans. Then you had the Silver Surfer being gender changed, which I refer to her as the She Surfer. And people didn't really like that and didn't see why they would do that and how that fit in. Well, the changes really with the Silver Surfer, I didn't feel were that profound. In fact, they actually worked for me. I felt like that if you didn't have the baggage, and I hate to use that term, I mean, if you didn't know that the Silver Surfer was male originally, this would have seemed like a no-brainer, the perfect setup to pit a female Silver Surfer against Johnny Storm. So, I mean, in the context of the movie, it didn't particularly bother me, but again, as a purist, I don't like the fact that we're never going to get Norrin Radd now in a proper Fantastic Four movie. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, that was just on this Earth, when they come to no, they're not going to. I mean, they may bring Norrin Radd, Silver Surfer, into the MCU, but it is not going to be as the Herald of Galactus. They're not going to use Galactus again. This was Galactus' big movie. And I don't think that you do a big, Hollywood blockbuster and then try to redo it and say, well, this is Earth 616's version of Galactus. He's exactly the same, does the exact same things, but this time he's got a male herald, and that male herald is, Norrin Radd and has basically the same story, but he's just a different guy. I'm pretty sure this was the only time we were going to see that kind of dynamic of Galactus and the Herald of Galactus being the Silver Surfer. Shala Bal, I believe, is the name of that character, who in the comics, of course, was the girlfriend of Norrin Radd. Anyway, so I think that this film really it works. That's the best way I could describe it. Is it good? Yes, it's good. It's different in the sense of a lot of things I really wasn't expecting. Like, for instance, the tone of this film is a lot more somber than I expected from the Fantastic Four. Now, this probably goes back to the preconceived ideas of what the Tim Story Fantastic Four films had me conditioned for. I think everybody that thinks of the Fantastic Four thinks of the lightheartedness, the goofiness. I seen The Incredibles a long time ago. Honestly, couldn't tell you too much about it from when it first came out. I seen it, but the family dynamic is the idea, and they kind of took a lot of that in The Incredibles, and this feels like it is not a lighthearted romp. Now, there is a lot of lighthearted moments, particularly in the first half, but I think they set out to make an actual serious picture. And for better or for worse, that's what it is. I mean, if you're going into this thinking it's going to be the goofy, the wacky, the slapsticky, it's not really that. And so you have to prepare yourself and condition yourself to understand that going into this. Um, Again, it's for better for worse. I think it works in this film. Do I want to see more of it like this for the Fantastic Four? No, not necessarily. But with a film that the stakes are this high, I can kind of understand it. Like, for instance, if I'm to compare it to something, Spider-Man 2 is not one of my favorite films. I know it's a big favorite of a lot of people, but for me, I felt like the Spider-Man doesn't get a lot of quips, doesn't get to do a lot of, the typical Spider-Man stuff. And that kind of like makes it feel different than Spider-Man to me. And I have a feeling that this is how I feel about the Fantastic Four First Steps. It's a good story. Spider-Man 2 is an exceptional story with an exceptional villain, but it didn't feel enough to me like the whimsical Spider-Man, the lightheartedness of it, because there was a lot of stakes that were just too high to make jokes over. I mean, what's Spider-Man going to make jokes about? I mean, he's lost his powers, and MJ is captured by Dr. Octopus, and you really don't have many chances for, a lighthearted touch. And I feel like the same is true here. And I think going forward, it would be better if they would sort of get into that lighthearted feel more. But given the story and what it is, and it's a good story, I think it's okay that we have sort of a heavier tone with this one. Um, Again, I that's sort of like a spoiler-free take on it. I would probably give this one 4 out of 5 stars if you just want to hear the cliff notes. It's good. It's good. It's solid, and the changes didn't really bother me too much. We'll get into that more now, but if you just want the bare minimum, that's probably all I can say without getting too into detail. All right, so now we're going to get into the spoilers. So you've been warned. You know, the thing is, another thing that this film reminded me of was X-Men Days of Future Past, which is, again, a really good story, a really good movie, but it doesn't really have the same beats as the comic. It's really its own thing. And I enjoyed, I enjoyed both, of course, the comic and the movie version, but the movie's completely different and the movie's completely acceptable. And I feel the same way here. If you're looking for the Watcher, if you're looking for the ultimate nullifier, you're not going to find any of that here. But what it does with the character of Galactus and the story is still very much accurate to the Lee Kirby story. It doesn't follow it at a one-to-one correspondence, but it does feel genuine to what they did with Galactus. The movies, again, another thing that it reminded me of was Superman that just came out, in the sense that they decided to forego a big origin. Now, the difference between this film and Superman is Superman threw you into it 3 years into Superman being on the job. This one throws you into it 4 years, get it, into the Fantastic Four's career. But they do give you a quick sort of synopsis of the origin. They're on a TV show, and the guy sort of is showing, what looks like old grainy footage of them getting ready to go into space. They come back from space. Oh, look, they've changed. And then the public already loves them. The problem with this is almost the same as, I think this is like maybe a little less of a problem than it was with Superman. But with Superman, they didn't even give you an origin, but we passed a lot of milestones that I think fans really deserve to see. But the fans have become so jaded with, oh, we know the origin. We don't want to see the origin again. But when you have that idea, when you have that mindset, you're not really allowing the film to set you up on the way this incarnation is going to come about. You just have to guess. You just have to make the logical assumption from what you already know about these characters. Now, for instance, I missed seeing Lois not know Clark was Superman. We got right into that from the jump. I want to see Clark keeping a secret from Lois. Then eventually, if you want her to find out, that's one thing. But I missed that, and we completely forego the three-sided triangle. Well, here we also forego a lot of stuff. We forego the courtship of Reed and Sue. I don't even remember if they were married before they went into space. It could be even that. We don't see really, how the friendship of Ben and Reed was tested when Reed, was responsible for Ben turning into this big rock creature man. And, he's already kind of made, come to terms with that, Ben, at this point in the story. We've just completely bypassed that. We don't really get to see what makes Ben and Johnny tight. You know what I mean? It's like, there's a lot of Johnny. This again goes back to the Tim Story films, which was what was so good about that. There's a lot of Johnny needling Ben in the comics. We don't really get any of that here. And it feels like Johnny has matured, and we really didn't get to see how he matured. So again, a lot of this is like, I don't really agree with doing it this way. When you tell the audience to fill in the gaps themselves, I think you should you should bring the audience along and get them there instead of having them do the work. And it kind of felt like that's what this film did, in as much as Superman did, was telling the audience, you already know this, and you just fill in the blank. Now, again, I don't feel like you need to be handheld or spoon-fed or whatever cliche you want to use, but there are things that fans want to see, and when you just bypass them and say, well, just, fill in the blank yourself. You know how they got here. You know how Ben made up with Reed. You know how, Johnny is or whatever. You know what I mean? You have to kind of show your audience that. Show, don't tell. That's kind of one of those, another cliche, I suppose, when it comes to writing. All right, so getting past that, the heart of the story is about Galactus coming, and Reed and Sue were going to have baby Franklin. If anybody knows the cartoons, they should know Franklin, of course, being a very powerful mutant in the MCU. I always liked Franklin being, a part of the story. We really haven't gotten that in live action yet, so I was really excited to see that they were going to bring him in and not, just try to bypass that part of the story. It seems like something that a lot of superhero stories do, is they don't want to, bring in the kid, Batman and Robin. Well, we can't have Robin because we don't want no, 14-year-old kid or whatever. But I feel like he's very much a part of the Fantastic Four. And I think Valeria, of course, came later, which I kind of stopped reading around the time when she was brought into it. So I don't know enough about that character, but I imagine they're going to try to bring her in eventually. Before we get to the beats of the story, maybe we should talk about the characters themselves. Again, Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards. I feel like they got the essence of the character right. It's very difficult for me because I can't help but see Pedro Pascal, especially since he wouldn't shave the stupid mustache. I mean, I remember of course, famously, Cesar Romero wouldn't shave his mustache to play the Joker. You kind of got away with it with him because he had the heavy makeup on, the grease paint or whatever that was covering his mustache. Sometimes it looked like it worked, sometimes it looked like it didn't. But here it just too much looks like Pedro Pascal, and it kind of takes me out of it a lot. But again, he pretty much performed the character as written. You know what I mean? This Reed is sort of, he's hampered, much like the comic incarnation. He's hampered in a way of his intelligence, and he tries to explain at one point. It's like he sees every bad scenario because he has to see every bad scenario, and it's like, it's the classic Marvel. It's a blessing and a curse. You know what I mean? I feel like they really got that aspect of Reed pretty well, in that, his relationship with Sue is good, but then again, there's always that part where he's kind of pragmatic, and he's kind of like knows what he's got to do, but he's still, emotional enough to understand that he can't just do what the logical thing is to do. In this case, of course, being sacrificing Franklin. And the story is that Galactus wants Franklin, which again, to me, was a good pivotal aspect of the story, but I wasn't quite sure what Galactus wanted to do with Franklin. He wanted to transfer his hunger to Franklin, and Franklin would be able to take care of it. Is that what it was? I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Or if not, he wanted to, I don't know, have Franklin take over his mantle or something. It seemed a little complicated to me in a way that I feel like I didn't grasp it properly, but maybe that was just, I don't know. Maybe it was just me overthinking it. Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm. Again, apparently here they don't change her name to Sue Richards. I didn't understand why. But she really is the heart of this film. She basically, I remember in the comics, there was this issue when I was a kid that was like really trippy, where Franklin became an adult, and she was basically on her own to try to save him and this and that, and it showed like the extremes that she would go to protect her child. And I felt like that was something that it was brought back to me watching this, that she is the mother of the MCU. You know what I mean? We don't really have mother superheroes, and in this case, I mean, she is the mother in the MCU. She is the mother of all superheroes. You know what I mean? Her strength is being maternal, and that's like powerfully on display here. And it's just magnificent. The Thing, Ben Grimm, my favorite member of the Fantastic Four ever since I was a kid. In the comics, he was just, everybody loved him. I don't understand why the Thing should be a Mount Rushmore character for every fan, but it seems like the prestige of the Fantastic Four has gone down. I'm not sure why. I was pretty critical of a lot of things with this Thing from the trailers and stuff. His voice does not sound any different than anybody else, and I think they should have modulated it a little bit. They didn't. I got used to it. It wasn't that big of a deal, quite honestly. I also thought the CGI was iffy in the trailers. I complained that Ben's eyes are beady looking. It's kind of uncanny valley. You kind of can tell he's not there. On the big screen, it's kind of 50-50. There's like 2 or 3 scenes that look very poorly done. One of them, I think, is when he's got Franklin on his lap. Another time, he was talking to somebody on a street. And it just doesn't really look real to me. And for some reason, this is the only time I've had this feeling. And I think they could have made his face look more lived in. They got a pretty good design, but for some reason, there's a lot of scenes where I don't buy it. There's other scenes where, I can believe it, but a lot of times I didn't. I would say 50-50. Something I didn't like about this film, and it's also in the Tim Story film, is they try to give Ben a relationship. And I always think this is because people are going to think, well, you got a 40-year-old guy, he doesn't have a girlfriend. What does that mean? He's gay? So they kind of try to have him talking to this girl that I don't really know what she does. She works in the synagogue or something. Again, this is them trying to bring Ben's Jewish roots or whatever into play so that they can score brownie points. I don't really think anything is gained by sort of retroactively going back and making him Jewish. Now, anybody knows me knows that, that's not a big deal to me if you're a character that was created that way. But whenever you go back and retroactively try to fill in a history that wasn't really there, that to me is problematic. I don't like when they do that. And again, this was sort of before the woke era, so it went under the radar. But honestly, I don't think it was necessary. So they had the token scenes of him. He goes into a synagogue, I guess, and it is what it is. But I mean, again, I just feel like that sort of takes me out of it. Like it feels like the film itself is not woke per se, but I always felt that was something that was kind of woke, where you kind of retroactively, after 30 years or so, 30 odd years maybe, trying to change the character's backstory. I just didn't feel it. They did the same thing, like I said, in the Tim Story film, where he was engaged to a woman, I think, and she broke it off when she saw that he was the thing. Again, I didn't feel like that was necessary either. I just feel like, why can't you just have the guy being who he is? He's a bachelor, and now he kind of looks like this. You can understand why he's a bachelor. I'm expecting them to bring in Alicia Masters at some point, hopefully, and that would settle that question, but who knows? They got a lot on their plate right now, let's put it that way, with Avengers Doomsday. And we have Johnny Storm. Now, this is the guy, I had a good feeling about this guy when I seen the trailers. I thought he was going to portray a really good Johnny Storm, and he did. He really felt like he had that sort of wisecracking pizzazz that a Johnny Storm needs. But they didn't take it to the extremes like they did with Chris Evans. And I can understand why. I mean, a lot of people were sort of grumbling, oh, he's not going to be a womanizer or this and that. Well, he's not a cartoony womanizer. I mean, that's not really a bad thing, to try to take the character a little more seriously. I mean, if you read the comics, you know that Johnny isn't really a womanizer. I mean, he has had, really strong, committed relationships over the course of the history of the comics. So it's not so much that he's a skirt chaser. He basically can settle down, if he's with the right person. But the problem is they kind of portrayed him in that cartoony sense, and kind of people expected to see that. And the wisecracks from him worked out a lot in the film. I thought that they were really good, and you see some of the goofiness of him. But again, they played him seriously. They didn't play him just for laughs. They played him with, he was the one to try to figure out what the Silver Surfer's language was, and that he was able to interpret it and, really bring the climax of the movie to a head. The Silver Surfer, the She Surfer, as I called her, again, I thought this was pretty good. I thought the actress was really good. At first, I remember saying that I couldn't take her voice seriously. She sounded too much like a little girl, a teenager or something, and it didn't really have any weight or menace. But to be honest with you, I felt that the Silver Surfer in Rise of the Silver Surfer, Lawrence Fishburne's voice, I felt that was too heavy. And so, I mean, I think the Silver Surfer, at least the way Stan Lee sort of portrayed him, is sort of like kind of angelic. It reminds me of like some of these classic Star Trek episodes where you had some, supposedly lofty, highly advanced alien that would talk in this sort of high-pitched and regal voice. And I kind of feel like that's what the Silver Surfer has. He's got kind of a lighter voice, but for a man. But then when you think of it, if you transpose a lighter voice to a Silver Surfer female, it's probably going to sound like the way Shalabal's voice sounded. So again, I can't really fault that her voice sounded that way. I mean, I got used to it too. And so putting those two together, I think, was a really good idea. Johnny Storm, you know, he's interested in the fairer gender. And we made the Silver Surfer the fair gender. It just seemed like it made sense. Now, there's a lot of times that being a purist, I'm going to grumble no matter what. But there are certain times like where if something works for a story, I don't really mind. I mean, like I think of off the top of my head, they race changed Kingpin in the Daredevil movie. And I still love that Daredevil movie. And I think Michael Clark Duncan was terrific in that. He was just perfect. And the fact that he was just a different skin tone than the comic, I can't help but say that it worked just as well, even as a purist. And I think like something like with Spider-Man 3, when they made Uncle Ben's killer Sandman and it was accidental and stuff, I don't like that, but it worked in context of that movie. And so I kind of feel like in this case, She-Surfer works in context of the movie. And so I can't really take points off the movie, maybe a tenth of a point or something, but I can't really fault them for doing it the way they did it. Now, again, let's touch on the scenes briefly here before we wrap up. But we have the Fantastic Four going into space, and they're going to try to plead their case to Galactus not to eat the world. And it's just a fantastic representation. I mean, if you see Galactus, I can't see anybody not being 100% thrilled with how they realize Galactus. He looks like he stepped from the page. The eyes and the lighting of the character, it looked perfect. And it becomes an issue then where he wants Franklin, and then they speed away. And this is the only big action scene really until the end. And I don't know, I mean, that's kind of one of the problems of the film, I would say, is that it's paced a bit uneven. And you get the big action scene like roughly in the middle of the film. I mean, we get sort of like I said, a montage of and they kind of name drop a lot of Fantastic Four villains that apparently are probably not going to get used again. I mean, they say, oh, Puppet Master is there, the Wizard's there, and they show the Red Ghost, who's actually cut from the film, his super apes or whatever. John Malkovich was, of course, in the trailer, cut from the movie. Stingray from Cobra Kai shows up as Mole Man, which is he's kind of played for a joke. But again, I mean, I don't know how seriously you could take the character of Mole Man. I mean, yeah, he's a serious villain, but I mean, he's basically a dwarfy looking guy with a crazy looking sunglasses. You know what I mean? So I mean, he has a couple of scenes, and they are pretty funny. Because, like I said, the movie is very somber. I mean, it's very serious. I don't know if somber is the right word, but it's morose. You know what I mean? It's serious. And so the action scene's really good, and it seems like Galactus somehow induces Sue's labor, which again is kind of, I don't really know how he does that. I don't really know how far along Sue was either, but and so she has a delivery in space, which I thought was really exciting, because I was thinking when I was seeing the trailers and the storylines where, oh, she's going to have Franklin, I just figured, there's going to be a time jump. And I mean, there is some time progression in the film, but I thought it was going to be, well, we'll skip, 6 to 8 months. And then the next thing you know, she's had the baby and she's recovered. But no, basically, that's part of the story, is her giving birth in space. And honestly, I'm not really a big fan of when they do like births in films, because it's usually like, I feel like, yeah, that's kind of a personal thing. I really don't feel like I need to be there, but I really felt different this time. I kind of felt like this was something that needed to be in the film because, like I was saying, I was thinking they were just going to kind of gloss over it. The kind of usual, guy comes in with flowers and knocks on the door, and oh yeah, there they are. But it kind of felt like this was important for the film, important for the story, and so I was actually all right with it. And so then we get back to Earth, and I think at that point the baby is a month old, I think, if I remember correctly. And they knock the she surfer into a black hole or something that's going to, at least according to Reed, I think, slow her down for a month. So apparently, not enough time is really slowed down for them because she's about to come back just around the time they come back. And the rest of the film, like I said, the next half of the film really revolves around preparing for Galactus. And it's not very action heavy, but I understand given the storyline. And they have a plan. Reed has a plan. The plan doesn't work out because the Silver Surfer returns, and Johnny has to confront the Silver Surfer, the she surfer, and we get sort of a brief look at her history. Now, this was a thing that I kind of understand why they didn't want to get us too close to the she surfer, but I feel like if you're going to do the Silver Surfer, you need to give us sort of a grounding of the character. For instance, the original Silver Surfer, he meets Alicia and she tells him about the world, and he kind of understands. With this, there's just like a brief scene between Johnny and her, and he's playing her words back to her, and she sort of has a flashback. And it's funny because I'm not sure, they don't really tell you if she had a family, that she's with a little girl, and it kind of reinforces the family message here that they're willing to do anything for Franklin. And again, I feel like they could have probably got a little deeper into that. I mean, I really didn't feel like there was anything in this film that needed to be unearthed more than maybe a minute or two. But this is probably one of those moments that they could have probably delved into for a minute or two longer and tried to maybe unearth why she did what she did, and how she kind of relates to the Earth. But I think the reason why they didn't do that is they wanted to preserve the surprise that she was going to come back and help, which I think we all kind of seen coming. I mean, at the very end, I kind of knew what was going to happen. But anyway, not to skip ahead, we have the plan, and the she surfer ends up ruining it. And so Reed and Sue have this like heated conversation where they're going to have to put the baby in jeopardy as a bait for Galactus. And that's when we get the actual Galactus coming onto the scene and walking through Manhattan or whatever. And it's really good. It's like, again, perfect CGI, perfect scene. And we got Mole Man taking everybody into his subterranean empire, which I thought was pretty cool. Again, kind of jokey, but it's one of those things. And I remember reading somebody on Twitter saying this. It's one of those gifts. The only gift probably that really mattered that Man of Steel gave us was that heroes are always going to prioritize emptying a city before the bad guys show up or do any real damage, because this is another case of that, where everybody evacuated, nobody's going to get hurt. We've got Galactus walking into buildings, doesn't matter, nobody's going to die. So again, I feel like that's kind of lesson learned from that film. But again, the big battle at the end over baby Franklin, it was really, really breathtaking. Again, this was a very emotional movie. I can't help but say I was emotional a lot during the end of this film. It's, not as much jokey as it is, a somber a tale of family. And there's some funny moments. I don't want to like try to downplay them. I mean, we have Herbie in here too, which I thought was cute. They have him doing a lot of stuff. I mean, he's only sort of a, I don't want to say just a, I don't know how to describe him. He's like a sort of butler, maybe. I don't know. But, they got like scenes of the Thing cooking. I don't really know. I don't really remember in the comics that being a big thing for him. But again, I mean, they try to do something with Ben, and I felt like of all the characters, they didn't know what to do with him the most. I think most people would probably say he got the short end of the stick of any of them. They had, again, they had like the joke about the beard. I mean, I never thought that the Thing could grow a beard. I mean, can he grow long hair if he wants to? I mean, you know, it's like they kind of were at a loss what to do with him, because this was not a film where he could just go punchy with people. And I'm glad they didn't force that into it, where he needed someone he could punch. I mean, he punched Galactus, but I mean, you're not going to do a lot of damage to him. But it felt like they really didn't have that opponent for Ben, and I'd like to see that going forward, that they're going to actually give him that. But again, Johnny, especially, I remember the scene where, before the Silver Surfer comes back and helps to trap Galactus, Johnny says, "Tell Franklin Uncle Johnny loves him." And I have to get emotional with that, because, I have a nephew, I have a niece, and I would do anything for them. And again, it goes to the maturity level of Johnny at this point, where he, without a second thought, is going to sacrifice himself for baby Franklin, his nephew. And it's the same thing for, all of them, of course. And at a certain point, Sue tells Johnny, to kill the Silver Surfer, because she's going to kill his nephew. And it's a very powerful moment. I mean, you've got to remember that when we see these kind of comic book things and the stakes are high and people are in jeopardy and the world is going to collapse and everything, you don't really see something this potent, where it's about a baby and a member of the family and protecting them at all costs. And I mean, there's just something so pure and emotional and touching in that. And of course, Sue ends up using her powers to force Galactus. And of course, all the team get to do their thing. I think, like I said, Ben doesn't get a whole lot to do with his powers. Reed probably is the next, but he at least gets to do a little things. He's like whacking Galactus back with spikes and what have you, and he's trying to like basically tear him in half. Galactus is trying to tear Reed in half, but and the Human Torch, of course, trying to make the sacrifice play where Silver Surfer stops him. But Sue basically, like, again, that maternal instinct, she basically gives her life to protect Franklin and forces Galactus back at least enough for him to get trapped in the black hole dimension or wherever it is. That's another thing that Superman also did, the black hole dimension or whatever it is. It's kind of coincidence. I'm not sure that they planned that one would be copying the other like that, but. And then Sue dies. Now, I'm not sure if this is something that happens a lot in the comics when it comes to the Silver Surfer or the Galactus stories, but they did the same thing in Rise of the Silver Surfer. So I was surprised to see this again. But and they're trying to revive her. And honestly, one of the things that makes me uncomfortable in movies, I kind of was talking about the, childbirth scenes and stuff. They usually are uncomfortable. Usually I don't feel like, I mean, a handful of times are okay. But I don't like seeing the resuscitation scenes, the artificial respiration and the mouth to mouth, and for some reason that feels too real world for me. I mean, you could show people doing that for a couple of seconds, but I think when you stretch it out, it becomes uncomfortable. And I think in this film, it was stretched out to the point of being uncomfortable. That's just me. That's my opinion. And of course, baby Franklin being the one, because, at this point, I'm wondering, what is it? She's just going to wake up, or is it the Silver Surfer? But then, because in the previous Silver Surfer version, he's the one that basically saves her life. But in this case, it's Franklin, and it's just so right. It's just so right that she sacrificed her life for him, and he's the one that can bring her back. And he has that power, and he doesn't even know it. He's a baby. But again, it's a really emotional and moving and a very powerful film. And I feel like, for what it is, it works. Do I want to see it always be this earnest and cloyingly sentimental and stuff? No, not always. But it does stay true to the characters, and I feel like it does fit the storyline that they were telling. And to wrap it up, they have they return to the TV show or whatever that they're going to do another appearance, and they want the producer or whatever wants to put Franklin in a Fantastic Five outfit, which I thought was pretty funny. And then they do this like prolonged gag about the car seat. I thought it was funny because that feels like what they should have been doing more often in this film. I mean, at least in the first half. But we only got like a couple of scenes that kind of wacky, and it shows that they're capable of it, and that's what's good. I mean, I hope that they continue to build on that wackiness. Show us more of Ben and Johnny going forward, doing the rivalry and the practical jokes and stuff. They mention Yancey Street. I'm not sure if that's where Ben is supposed to be when he's going and visiting the kids and the synagogue or whatever, but I would like to see the Yancey Streeters prank Ben. I don't know if we're going to get to that now because he's going to be leaving this dimension. Yeah, I guess I could talk about the look of the film a little bit. A lot of people were clamoring for this retro 60s type, for lack of a better term, Jetsons aesthetic. I think it looked good. I mean, I don't think that we really needed that. I mean, the way this story was designed, the Fantastic Four are the only heroes in this universe, in this world anyway. And I guess it worked in that sense. But I really don't feel like we needed this to be on a different universe. It's just, how many Fantastic Four stories did the Fantastic Four pretty much single-handedly defeat Galactus? I mean, people would have been like, oh, where was the Avengers during all this? Well, you're going to have that anyway, because when Bob was blanking people out and everything, Spider-Man wasn't around and Doctor Strange wasn't around. And you just got to make allowances that these heroes are doing other things. They're probably saving other people. And, it's not something that you should get hung up on, because it's been like that in the comics for many decades now. And the score was pretty good, Fantastic Four. Kind of a different take on, I like that, that kind of kitschy sort of throwback to the 60s type thing. And they didn't have Johnny say Flame On. I get the feeling they probably did, and it was just cut out for whatever reason, because they had him with the little action figure saying Flame On. So, I mean, technically it's in the film, but not him saying it. They had the gimmick that you've seen in the trailer where the Thing doesn't want to say it's clobbering time. He finally says it. It's, I mean, if that's the way they want to handle it the first time, that's fine. But if it's one of these things where he won't say it, I don't know. That's kind of childish. I don't really need that. I just, I want them to be authentic to way Ben Grimm was, which was to always say that whenever he was getting into battle. And again, going forward, like I said, I would like to see more of, the interaction between these guys are going to be amazing when they actually get into the Avengers. I mean, they don't end this film. They get the cliffhanger in Thunderbolts / New Avengers, where they see the plane coming in, the Fantastic Four jet, and this does not end like that at all. This ends with a post-credit scene where Sue is reading to Franklin. She goes to get another book, and then Franklin is apparently touching the face of Dr. Doom, and he's a little bit older now, Franklin. I think they said he's 4 years old. And Doom has got the mask off, but you can tell the cloak and everything. I think they said that is actually Robert Downey Jr. because he's going to play Doom, of course, in Avengers Doomsday. And since he's touching his face, people suggest that that probably means that he's healing his face. But we all know that he's going to look like Robert Downey Jr. He's going to look like Tony Stark, I guess. So this is kind of interesting, the way they're framing this. That is it Franklin that made him look like Tony Stark? Did Doom want him to look like Tony? Did Doom want him to make his face look like Tony Stark? I don't know. This is like really interesting. So the final, if you waited all the way to the end, you get a little tribute to Jack Kirby. This world was, the date of Kirby's birth is the number of this universe. And they show the cartoon of the Fantastic Four that apparently this universe watches. I'm always interested in the fact that they try to make Fantastic Four synonymous with Jack Kirby. I guess it's because it's his favorite of his co-creations. But I mean, he had the same amount of work, right? And almost every other character. I mean, of the famous ones, he did the Hulk, he did Thor, he did most of them. And it's like, it feels though like they give the most credit to Kirby with Fantastic Four. So again, they say the Fantastic Four will return in Avengers Doomsday. That is next on the agenda. Apparently, it's supposed to come out next year. I don't think they're going to make that date. They're going to end up, they're shooting it now, but it's not going to be done in time. I'm pretty sure they're going to postpone it to another year, but hopefully we'll be able to see this cast interact, sometime next year. And, I'd love to see the Thing take on the Hulk if we can finally get a good, decent version of the Savage Hulk again. I'd love to see this version of the Human Torch interacting with Peter Parker, Spider-Man. And of course, Reed and Sue, it's going to be kind of hard because I don't know who they would interact well with, seeing as how, the leader of the Avengers is Captain America, Steve Rogers, no longer with us, Tony Stark, scientific genius, no longer with us. They kind of brought Reed in where there's not really too many contemporaries. You have Hank Pym, I guess, but Michael Douglas is retiring, so he's not going to be playing him unless they recast him. That's probably not going to be something that he is going to work with. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes. So again, not a perfect film by any stretch, no pun intended. But the thing is, no pun intended, it's a pretty solid film, and it really speaks well to the concept and the characters, even if it's not as slavishly faithful as we might have hoped it would be. But I think there's room for improvement. It's the exact same story as Superman. There's a pretty good foundation to build on here. And I think the next film would and should build on these characters and make them even closer to their comic counterparts, the same as Superman. They gave us a good foundation. Is it a film that's a Mount Rushmore film? No. But it sets the stage for a new generation for Superman, for a new, universe for him to play in, to, inhabit with other heroes and this and that. That's also what this film is for the Fantastic Four. In both ways, you've got to sort of squint and say, okay, some of this doesn't work for me, but it still is a pretty strong entry point for them to build on for the future and just improve over time. All right, so again, I'm going to give the Fantastic Four First Steps 4 out of 5 stars right now. I am going to give it maybe an 8 out of 10, and I'm going to give it an A-. I think I'll give it an A-. I was going to give it a B+. I'm giving it sort of a half a point more than I gave Superman. Does that mean it's a better film? No, but I think it might be a slightly better Fantastic Four film than Superman was a Superman film, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So once again, I hope I remembered everything that I wanted to talk about with this, but it's a late night Johnnie Torch Reviews. And thank you for spending the time with me. If you have, in fact, listened to the whole review, let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What are your likes and dislikes about the film? Do you think the she surfer ended up serving its purpose in this film, or do you think they should have went with the male Silver Surfer? Do you think Galactus was all that he was billed to be? Do you like the actors? You know, Pedro Pascal. How did he do? Do you think that he accurately, was true to the roots of the character of Reed Richards, or did that take you out of the movie? Let me know in the comments below. And until next we meet, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.